If you like what I do, consider joining my channel or donating to my coffee. Links in the description. Folks, today we take a look at a real underdog story. A tale of two developers who wouldn't exactly call getting their game to market smooth sailing. After an underfunded Kickstarter campaign, Cool Taper Studio could have called it quits, rolled over, and given up on their dream. But they didn't. Instead, they buckled down, determined to complete their passion project and make it a reality. They launched The Last Vanguard into early access in late 2024, and by May 2025, the 1.0 version hit digital shelves. If anything, I wanted to take a look at this game just to witness the fruits of this team's gumption. But I should probably see what it's about first. In Last Vanguard, you play as Tillian, the titular Last Vanguard. Tillian awakens from cryogenic slumber in an underground bunker. Once he gets his bearings, he's thrust into a war-torn, diesel-punk world oppressed by a tyrant only known as the Absolute Leader. Tillian's goal is to take down this tyrant, and the only way to get close to him is to win a brutal tournament to become his next commander. Thus, Tillian must embark on one of the most epic training arcs in video game history if he wants to even stand a chance against the deadly participants blocking his path to the tyrant. This run-and-gun Metroidvania sounds like it could be a contender, but can this underdog really become a champion in the genre?
Combat.
As stated in the intro, Last Vanguard is a run-and-gunner. Tillian starts with a little pistol and a pretty good set of movement options to help with positioning, like a double jump and a dash that also works in the air. And let me tell you, this game is all about positioning. Tillian can fire across the screen and take out aerial threats with ease thanks to his range and positioning locking feature. Just hold down a button and you can fire in any direction, except diagonally down. Even when jumping and shooting, you still can't aim diagonally down, but you can aim straight down. It's an odd limitation, but at least you get tools that can fill in this restrictive gap. And by tools, I mean guns. Lots and lots of guns. I liked the variety of guns in this game. You got little pew-pews, bigger pew-pews, electric zzz that require you to charge before firing, bouncing boomers that go and some other really odd guns I don't want to spoil here. Guns you collect get progressively more powerful as the game goes on, reflected by their star rating. Though the objectively best gun in the game is one that's 3 out of 5 stars, I deemed this bad boy the Boss Killer. Why? Because it was literally the only gun that does significant damage in the game. Most guns hit for like 2 to 4 damage, with the shotgun doing a whopping 8. The Boss Killer? 22 after a full charge. And with how tanky some of these bosses can be, you're gonna want that kind of damage. If I had one nitpick about the bosses, it's that they seem to have way too much HP. Either that, or guns were super weak in general, which is what I think the actual case is. Honestly, I wouldn't be offended if some of these guns were given a little extra oomph to help take these bosses out faster. As for the bosses in general, they're outstanding. They had amazing designs, and fighting them was equal parts challenging and rewarding. There were many times I stumbled across bosses that were a little too much for me at the time, and I had to backpedal and return with better gear, and I love when MVs do that. It just makes coming back later to take them out that much more satisfying. And if a boss completely stomping you wasn't hint enough for you to return later, you can see a boss's difficulty rating in the map represented by the stars. In large part, I don't have issue with the game's general combat. You run, you gun, and it all feels really good. I will say this game uses this antiquated method of gearing up Tillian. Firstly, Tillian is highly customizable. You can equip him with a gun, give him 3 special abilities, add gadgets to guns that work like charms from Hollow Knight, and even put on different helmets that affect the game in some way or another. It's all really cool stuff, but you can only switch out and customize Tillian at certain stations. There's nothing inherently wrong with this. I'd just like to be able to switch out guns whenever, or equip multiple guns that I can switch on the fly, given that some guns provide better benefits in certain scenarios. But I'm not one to lament what could have been, and so what we have in Last Vanguard is serviceable and works fine. But Man, would being able to equip a couple of guns that I could switch out at the press of a button be big. I guess the next thing to bring up about combat is the cord. The cord is probably the most unique mechanic Last Vanguard brings to the table, and ultimately, I like it, though it does come with a learning curve. So the cord has a dedicated button, and you use it to whip enemies, meaning you gotta be up close and personal if you wanna hit anything with it. And when you do hit something, you do the least amount of damage possible. It's heartbreaking, considering the enormous risk you have to take to hit with it. So, why would you want to hit anything with your cord? Because that's the only way to build up your energy. Without energy, you can't use your special abilities, and some of those special abilities are amazing, like the one that erases every bullet on the screen, the one that negates a single point of damage from any source, or the one where you heal yourself with a bot. Abilities are quite diverse and super helpful, considering this game is actually pretty dang tough. So, whipping jerks with your cord is definitely something you'll be doing throughout your playthrough. The cord is also used for platforming, but more on that in the next section. As cool as the abilities are in this game, I was flabbergasted when I learned I could equip 3 at any time on any button I wanted. I'll completely own that I'm a dummy, but this UI layout had me thinking that only the top row could be equipped to the A button, the middle to the left bumper, and the bottom to the right. And because these two nodes were shattered, I thought I had to unlock the right bumper slot before I could equip anything. But no, that's not the case. You can equip any ability to any button at any time. I was on this game's final biome before I discovered that. I could contribute it to me being a dummy, but you can't tell me the UI isn't a little confusing. But maybe it's just me overthinking things. An overthinking dummy. What an oxymoron. That's it for combat. Last Vanguard gives you a large arsenal of mostly grounded firearms and an assortment of interesting and fun special abilities to keep things competitive and fresh as you prepare yourself for the big tournament. The cord makes things stylish while also adding some risk-reward to the fray. The gameplay's fast, the bosses are brutal if not a bit tanky, and if you're smarter than I am and figure out the UI, there's a surprising amount of depth here. Last Vanguard is a game that rewards patience, positioning, and maybe just a little masochism. Hey everyone, this is post-editing Luke. I just realized that I completely neglected something in the combat section, and that's because this feature is actually pretty negligible in the normal version of the game, or its normal difficulty, I mean. And this feature is the reload feature. Basically, your gun has so many bullets in its clip, and after you drain the clip, you gotta reload. It really doesn't affect the game at all in the normal difficulty. However, in the harder difficulty, it's everything. In the normal difficulty, you just shoot your gun until the bullets are gone, and then you just reload. There's no consequences, nothing. It's just like, there's a brief pause, and then you get back to shooting. In the hard difficulty, you need energy to reload your gun. And so that means you're gonna be doing a lot more cord snapping on enemies in a harder difficulty. I didn't play the game on the hard difficulty. I kept it on normal, but man, that sounds ridiculously tough. So if you really want this game to be as hard as it possibly can be, the hard difficulty's for you.
Abilities, platforming.
The most surprising thing about Last Vanguard is that there really isn't a lot of traversal abilities to unlock. Tillian gets a double jump and an air dash on the onset and then learns to climb ropes within the first 10 minutes or so. After remembering how to climb ropes, the world's pretty much your oyster with really nothing stopping you from getting anywhere you want, at least on the critical path. There are traversal skills you unlock throughout your journey, and these traversal skills are only required to progress through a single late game area. Otherwise, they're mostly used within the legacy dungeons you get them in or to open up optional paths. As far as platforming is concerned, it's great. Platforming on the overworld is just kind of okay, but some of these legacy dungeons, and especially the final biome, will really test your platforming chops. Especially with the cord I talked about in the previous section. Double jumping, air dashing, whipping your cord at special hooks, while below you, barbed wire or lasers threaten to tear you to shreds, is pretty exhilarating. And there's all kinds of creative hazards to overcome, like a section where you get caught between two warring factions as mortar fire pulverizes the landscape, or an extremely cold area where you have to maneuver a fire lantern around so you don't freeze to death. Or you might find another solution that renders a fire lantern moot, and I love that kind of player freedom. And every legacy dungeon also brings some kind of gimmick to the table, keeping things fresh as you move along. Puzzles in the game are mostly all about flipping switches to unlock paths or figuring out how to use your new abilities to overcome new obstacles. It's nothing huge, but it works well enough. And that's it for abilities and platforming. Last Vanguard may not stuff your pockets with traversal upgrades, but it makes the few you do get count, especially when it puts your skills to the test in its legacy dungeons. What it lacks in constant movement drip feed, it makes up for with smart platforming and creativity.
Progression.
I haven't talked about it yet, but Last Vanguard is a very open and non-linear game, which is a huge plus in my book. But I'll dive deeper into the specifics in the exploration section. For now, just know that the game is very open. And as is typical with very open games, progression can be hard to nail simply because the player has so much freedom and there's no real path they can follow that ensures they build themselves up properly. What does Last Vanguard do to alleviate this concern? It literally keeps you weak the entire game. Now, I'm being a little facetious as Last Vanguard does have interesting systems in place to ensure you're feeling some sort of progression, either by giving you better equipment or by allowing you to weaken your opponents. Let's start with the former, giving you better equipment. Tilion doesn't have stats, nor does he level up, but he can get better stuff, and that stuff comes in 4 varieties. Guns, special abilities that require energy, helmets, and gadgets. From what I can tell, you can find special abilities, helmets, and gadgets in the same place during every playthrough. But guns, I think, are given to you based on how many bosses you defeat. For instance, I beat this very difficult 3-star boss and got a 3-star gun. But much later, I defeated a 1-star boss I had missed and was given a 5-star gun, which felt out of place given how easy the fight was. I have a hard time believing I would have gotten that 5-star gun had I beaten that boss much earlier in the game. So that's one way Last Vanguard deals with open world progression. And it's actually pretty clever, but despite me collecting every gun in the game, no gun felt super powerful. Except for the almighty boss killer, of course. The other way Last Vanguard deals with open world progression is by allowing you to weaken your opponents. This is easily my favorite aspect of the game because it's so unique. If you recall, there's a tournament you must win to gain access to the absolute leader. Winning this tournament requires you to defeat all other combatants. You can technically compete in this tournament whenever you want, given you can cover the $600 entry fee, but facing the combatants too early can lead to an early defeat. Instead, you should seek out and challenge these combatants in the overworld prior to facing them in the tournament. Doing so grants you great rewards as well as weakens the combatants during the tournament. It's pretty great stuff. There are other things Tilion can do to get stronger. You can increase your max HP and energy by finding and eliminating the absolute leader's commanders. And there's a base building mechanic that nets you money on a regular basis depending on how much you've invested into the base. And with this money, you can buy helmets and gadgets in shops sprinkled throughout the world. I wish there were more things you could do with cash as I was swimming in the stuff before mid-game, so I wouldn't sweat the small stuff when it comes to amassing wealth. You do lose some cash every time you die, but it never really affected me too much. And that's it for progression. Last Vanguard isn't only about gaining power, it's also about weakening your enemies. Whether you're tracking down higher ranked guns, buying or finding rare gadgets, or outsmarting the tournament meta by beating up your opponents before the big fight, Last Vanguard finds clever ways to reward exploration and experimentation.
Exploration.
Exploration in Last Vanguard is sublime. There's so much to do, so much to see, and so much to find that I couldn't wait to see everything its world had to offer. And the game's openness really puts the entire experience in your hands. Remember finding the Dreamer's statues in Hollow Knight and how the game puts the Dreamer's locations on your map and lets you decide how to tackle them on your own? Or how in Biomorph you're given the locations of all those giant but are given the freedom to find them in whatever order you want? That's basically the entirety of Last Vanguard. After the first 20 minutes or so, Last Vanguard takes off the training wheels, circles 3 locations on your map, and basically says, good luck. And I love this kind of setup. The more freedom, the more fun, I always say. But there's a common pitfall developers run into with this design: not properly scaling the world, or worse, not scaling it at all. And unfortunately, Last Vanguard trips headfirst into this trap. So what exactly do I mean? Well, when you build a world where the player can go anywhere at any time, everywhere they go has to be viable. But in trying to make every location accessible from the jump, games often flatten their difficulty curve. Instead of ramping up challenge as you progress, the whole experience can feel static. My theory is that Last Vanguard tries to solve this in two ways. One, by scaling the strength of the guns you find based on how many bosses you've defeated, and two, by keeping most gun damage relatively low, with a few notable exceptions, like the almighty boss killer, hallowed be thy name. So, does it work? Mostly. I never found the game boring. I genuinely enjoyed shooting stuff, exploring its world, and taking on its cornucopia of bosses. But I'd be lying if I said something didn't feel missing. When it comes to mechanics, the most exciting parts of a Metroidvania are almost always combat and movement progression. Players want to feel stronger, and they want to get around your world faster. You ever go back to an early biome with a late game build? In a great Metroidvania, you should feel like an unstoppable force steamrolling through the area at Mach speeds. In the words of one of my favorite internet memes, nothing in those early areas can stop you because Last Vanguard drops the ball on that front. As already stated, you don't really get better damage output as you progress, maybe better DPS, and you're given all your traversal abilities at the start of the game. You basically feel the same at the beginning of the game as you do in the end. Now, that's not to say you won't feel stronger as the game progresses. The gadgets and abilities you equip do a lot of heavy lifting to make you feel powerful. It's just that the power scaling is very slight comparatively. Let's look at the first Blasphemous, a game that does something similar to Last Vanguard. Blasphemous is open, at least for its first 3 legacy dungeons before the Mother of Mothers. Penitente doesn't have any traversal ability upgrades other than what he starts with. And he doesn't really get a whole lot of damage upgrades aside from sword hearts and rosaries, and if you miss those, your damage isn't going anywhere. The big difference between Last Vanguard and Blasphemous's open world approach is that Blasphemous scales its enemies in such a way that players will be challenged if they go one direction instead of the other. Blasphemous certainly will punish you with tougher enemies if you go to where the olive trees wither before going to Mercy Dreams or Yondo. Of course, Blasphemous also rewards you with a unique side quest if you do these biomes quote-unquote out of order. But the point is, Blasphemous has a sense of scale for its exploratory difficulty, while Last Vanguard's scaling is much less pronounced. That said, Last Vanguard does have some tough areas, and it smartly offers alternate routes or solutions if you're not ready to tackle them head on. And if you do take on these tougher challenges, the game rewards you for it. Smart design either way. Now, I don't want to sound contradictory here, so I want to make things clear. Last Vanguard's regular enemies feel samey when it comes to difficulty, but those bosses are a different story. I mentioned earlier that this game is tough, and I stick by that. Some of these bosses will kick your ass up and down the street, and these bosses will most likely have a 3-star rating on the in-game map. Speaking of the map, it definitely needs some improvement. The devs are aware of this and are actively working on updating it, so there's a very good chance the map will be better when you watch this. Just know, at launch and as of the publication of this video, the map has some quirks. It's not a bad map, it provides room shapes accurately, shows you where you are at all times, and provides the locations of any bosses and fast travel points you've found. The main issue with the map is that it doesn't center on your location when you open it. That's it. It's a very small problem, but it gets obnoxious having to find yourself on the map every time you fast travel. Hopefully, the update to improve the map gets here soon. It's not a deal breaker by any means, but it's slightly annoying. Speaking of fast travel, it's a waypoint system in this game. I don't have a lot to say about it. It works as intended. I do wish they would have placed a waypoint directly by your camp. Tillian has a fast travel bot he can use anytime he wants, and it brings him back to his home base whenever he uses it. Placing a fast travel point at the home base would have just been so convenient. That's it for exploration. Last Vanguard gives you a world worth diving into, packed with content, bosses, and freedom to explore at your own pace. It nails the spirit of open world Metroidvanias, even if it doesn't fully deliver on the scaling that makes those worlds feel progressively rewarding. A few map quirks and a lack of traditional power growth might leave some players wanting more. But if you're the type who loves chasing down optional challenges, digging through dungeons, and finding your own path through a diesel punk war zone, there's a lot here to love. It's not perfect, but when it works, Last Vanguard's world pulls you in and doesn't let go.
Atmosphere, narrative.
Last Vanguard immerses players in a richly crafted, hand-drawn world brought to life through meticulous frame-by-frame animation. The art style pays clear homage to classic Fleischer Studio era cartoons, while also blending in modern CalArts flair with its character designs. Think Adventure Time, but in an apocalypse. Well, a not-so-bright apocalypse. This mix of old and new gives the world a nostalgic yet distinctly contemporary personality, infusing both its environments and characters with a charm that feels fresh and familiar all at once. Complementing the visuals is an understated musical score. The music's restrained presence allows the sepia-toned visuals and intricate animations to take center stage, while still providing an emotional undercurrent that enhances the overall bleakness of the atmosphere. Narratively, Last Vanguard presents a world teetering on the edge, ruled by an oppressive tyrant. The story is delivered through environmental cues, character interactions, and the more absurd movie projectors set up before and after boss fights for your viewing pleasure. It's a bit silly, but all these methods combined allow players to piece together the game's lore organically. The narrative itself isn't going to hook you, but it's a fine enough vehicle to push you along while you focus on the more important things, like shooting. And that's it for this section. Last Vanguard's fusion of animation influences and thoughtful art design creates a visually pleasing and charming experience. Last Vanguard's narrative isn't going to keep you glued to your seat. Its combat, platforming, and exploration will do that, but its unique take by making the entire adventure essentially a training montage is a fascinating hook. The one thing that makes this training arc next level is if you could actually complete the game anytime you wanted. But it's just not possible because you need certain abilities to progress into the final biome. And you can only get these abilities out in the world. But think about it. How awesome would it be to just skip the entire game, complete the tournament with each competitor at their full potential, and then walk up to the absolute leader and take them out with 0 upgrades? That sounds like a super awesome challenge.
Final thoughts and score.
Last Vanguard is one of those scrappy, underdog Metroidvanias that punches above its weight in a lot of areas. The combat's got bite, the platforming is sharp, and the open-ended structure invites exploration on your own terms, even if the power scaling doesn't always keep up with your ambition. The Cord is a unique mechanic that adds both flavor and finesse to fights, the boss designs are stellar, and the handcrafted world is packed with personality, brought to life through a striking blend of Fleischer-style animation and modern cartoon charm. Is it perfect? Nah, but what is? The gun damage feels a little too flat, the map needs some polish, and you're probably not going to walk away raving about the story. But for every stumble, there's something clever, challenging, or flat out cool waiting around the corner. It's a diesel punk gauntlet wrapped in charm and grit, and if you're willing to put in the work, Last Vanguard will absolutely make it worth your while. I award Last Vanguard a 7.5 out of 10. The Last Vanguard is available on PC. I played The Last Vanguard exclusively on the Steam Deck. I had 0 issues with performance until I reached the final boss. Thankfully, a patch has been released that has corrected the issue, and I was able to kick the absolute leader's butt. Therefore, I can confidently award Last Vanguard, as long as you have the most up-to-date version, a Steam Deck rating of verified.
Pair placement.
Last Vanguard is a solid Metroidvania in its own right. I love its non-linearity, the way the training arc lets you weaken other combatants before facing them, and its boss fights are a major highlight. The platforming sections are strong, and visually, the game is outstanding. There's a lot to love here. If I had one major point of contention, it'd be the game's approach to progression. While gadgets, helmets, and special abilities are cool and genuinely helpful, Last Vanguard lacks a satisfying sense of power scaling. At no point did I feel truly powerful in the way I usually do near the end of a great Metroidvania. By the endgame, I was still dishing out modest damage, bosses felt just as tanky as ever, and my traversal toolkit hadn't really grown since the opening act. That said, this didn't spoil the experience for me, not even close. I still had a blast taking down bosses, and the platforming consistently upped the ante in a way that felt fair and engaging. And when it comes to exploration, Last Vanguard is top shelf material. Its world pulls you in, and the freedom to carve your own path makes it hard to put down. The Last Vanguard takes down tyranny in the B tier. For those who live for freedom and optional boss hunts, Last Vanguard is bound to strike a chord.